It is always a pleasure to hear you speak. And I think the last time I had the opportunity was in an event in Bangalore, a couple of years ago. Of course, you come with a huge amount of experience working with multinationals like Fujitsu, I guess, and AT&T, and then Mindtree. Am I right in thinking that Flutura is your first entrepreneurial piece, or is there something?
That's right. That's the first entrepreneurial piece.
So, as a co-founder of one of the most successful, data science companies in the country, it is a pleasure to invite you to be here. So, over to you, and look forward to hearing you.
Thank you, Sabudh, and very good morning to all of you. So I'll just give a quick introduction to Flutura itself. So basically, as Sabudh said, Flutura is an industrial AI company, which is focused on impacting outcomes in the energy and engineering sector. So if we step back and broadly look at the AI space, there are two broad buckets. One is a consumer AI space, retail, telecom, digital kind of space, where bulk of the startups are. We decided to focus on the industrial space, which is oil and gas, manufacturing, defense, large industries with a lot of data, which has not yet been monetized. So our vision was to create a category leader from India from a product point of view, and Gartner has thankfully ranked us as among the top 3 startups in the world today. And our vision is to intensify that. So what I'll share today is not about Flutura at all. So what I wanted to share today is from the point of view of you as students, you would be looking at 3 things. I was thinking. So one is real world applications. So I'll give you a couple of real world applications and what is the value they unlocked. I'll also talk a little bit of, and many of you would be rightfully bothered about what kind of career path exists. So I'll touch upon a little bit about what we are seeing from a career path perspective if you're seeking employment. And these are exciting times to become an entrepreneur. So I'll just touch upon a little bit. Sarabjit talked about a little bit about that. How do you apply AI to build products, companies, and business models? So I'll just touch upon a little bit in the next 60 minutes. The intention is to give you a thali full of little bit of things. It's not a very intensive thing. I'll give you a little bit of everything. If something interests you, we can probably have an offline conversation. So I'll start with some real world applications. The first thing I wanted to talk is, this is one of the most signature projects which we did. Shell actually makes oil, all of you know that. So there are 3 parts to it, where they produce oil upstream, they transport oil midstream, and finally, it's refined and distributed to the petrol bunks. And that's downstream. So we were focused on the midstream part of it, where there is a network of pipes transporting oil from point A to point B. And it was in a place called the Appalachian Basin. So what essentially the problem they're trying to solve is, every time that for example, I have a simple compressor or a motor in the system. Every time I replace that, there is something called production deferment. All the production stops, and that typically results in, as one example said, $12 million in lost revenue. Every time you stop operations, the question they're trying to solve is, can I simulate the effect of change in equipments on the overall revenue and the overall production, and reduce production deferment itself? So they wanted to create essentially a simulation tool which will help them simulate the effect of equipment changes on production. So what happened is, at the end of the day, all these pipes, it's a network of sensors, the temperature sensors, pressure sensors, which track the flow rate of stuff. All of these sensors were about 1.6 terabyte of information. We essentially did the 3-step process. We built what is called as a digital twin of the equipment itself. That noise in the background. It's actually muted, I think. The noise is a little loud. So So what we essentially did was we created what is called as the digital twin of the network. So think of it as being a Xerox copy of the motor or the pump or the pipe on the software itself. We created the digital twin, which means we'll say what are the subsystems in the network, what are the various sensors, what are the various kinds of signals we get, what are the various ways in which an equipment could die, what we call as high value failure modes. All of that was mapped onto the digital twin. Then we created what is called as the digital diagnostics. It's almost similar to your health checkup. You go to a doctor, the first thing they do is they do a blood test, they do basic urine test to figure out what are the anomalies they see. And if they're not able to find out anything from your lab reports, they go to the next level, say, I want to do a deeper CAT scan, I want to do an MRI to find out if they see any anomalies in that. Similarly, in the equipment world also, if you want to diagnose the health of the equipments, we do what is called as a digital diagnostics of the equipment to see where did you see anomalous behavior. And once we understand what kind of anomalous behavior that equipment experienced, we'll be able to do what is called as a prognostics. Prognostics essentially means how long will this equipment live? When will this network go down? So that's essentially what we did in this whole thing. I just wanted to warn you, in this whole presentation, I'm not going to talk about algorithms because Sarabjit has, I'm sure, a lot of knowledge has been transmitted. So I'll talk only about the applications and features here. So if you look at what was the effect before and after Cerebri, if you look at the shell network of pipes, there was no unified view of situational awareness. What is happening right now? There's no command center. Right now, we are giving them a real-time view of that. They were not able to accurately predict the effect of a change in compressor on oil volumes. They're able to do that right now, and they're able to also benchmark some of the best. So if you look at it, there is simulation is there, simulation ability to do what if scenarios is there, ability to show the fidelity of the model is there, ability to do this in real time, not on an offline basis is interesting. And if there are some early warning health signals, the network is going down, if there is corrosion in the pipeline, if there is leakage, if there is any hazardous gas being emitted, there are early warning health signals about the whole ecosystem which gets trapped in real time and responded to. And finally, security is a very big issue in today's world. There are a lot of fears about hackers, both nation actors from the nation as well as individual hackers, breaking into industrial grid. So security is also a huge thing. So these are, I just thought I'll share with you some of the screenshots. So essentially, this is how the actual network would look like. So it's almost like a pipe network. The most important thing is they're able to put changes in input flow meter, changes in pressure, changes in temperature, do the simulation, and essentially visualize the state of the network for that combination of this thing. So the whole network is simulated. Simulation result is shown to them. And finally, every simulation you do, all the what if simulation, there is a history of logs which you maintain, which shows you, what is the impact each simulation had on the physical outcome itself. And if there are, and then reality is also mapped. So if there are differences in model fidelity, and if there is an impact on the economic outcome, that is also tracked and shown to them. And we are also able to isolate, do basic anomaly detection, and show them which of the subsystems are unhealthy, in the whole network. So this is what Shell was calling the future of Shell's oil operations. And this was a consortium which consists of Schlumberger, Rebellion Photonics, sensor manufacturers, Technip FMC, Rockwell Automation. And we were proud to say that we are humbled to see that also that we are the only Indian company out there. Everyone else was American in nature. So it's a huge, satisfying experience for an Indian company to take part with this American consortium and really reimagine the future of well operations powered by AI. At the end of the day, it was completely powered by the algorithms out of a company out of India. The second area which I wanted to focus on is Flutura as a company focuses a lot on vision analytics, what I call as industrial vision analytics. So if you look at, there's a lot of sources of unstructured video feeds in a company. Simple thing is your surveillance cameras, which are operating at the perimeter of a factory or inside the factory operations itself. And whenever a welding operation is done, let's say you're making a nuclear boiler, or you're making a ship, or you're making a battle tank, you have to join parts together and weld it with think of it the fevicol of metallic things. You have to weld. So every time you weld two metallic parts, you have to test it out. So what they do is they do a radiological test. It's like doing X-ray tests. Okay. And once an X-ray is taken out of the weld joint, you have to figure out whether there are any cracks in it, because the whole weld is as strong as the weakest link. So we did a lot of work on welding anomaly detection, corrosion detection in ships, from a safety point of view, detecting oil spills. And off late, within a industrial setup, are people practicing social distancing, all of that stuff, wearing safe things. I'll talk a little bit about the quality. So this is for a major defense manufacturer in India, and the electronic components they make goes into the missile systems, goes into a lot of electronic control automation software in the battle tanks, in the radar systems which are there. So, and it's very important for them to detect defects in the PCB boards. And today what happens is there are more than 20 plus defects, and it's completely done by a human. So at the end of the day, a human uses his eyeball, and he doesn't have much tools. He uses eyeball, sometimes a magnifying glass, to look at the PCB and say whether there is any defective tool or not. What we did was essentially provide them with augmented inspection, as we call it. The human is still there in the loop examining it. So, but you have a digital assistant, as we call it. A digital assistant is is a neural network which examines the PCB and says if it has detected any of the defects. And if it has detected any defect, then it will pass it on to the human also. So it's, think of it like a nurse in a hospital, right? So whenever you go to a doctor, the nurse takes your BP, she takes your temperature, a lot of readings are collected, and they do basic anomaly detection, and then they pass it on to the doctor. A similar model is what we are adopting out here. The second thing we talked about, welding defects. So if you look at India itself, it's becoming a manufacturing hub, whether as a part of Atmanirbhar program of India, where you're starting to locally manufacture a lot of defense products, aircrafts, battle tanks, guns. Every one of these things has a weld defect. And quality is a huge issue out there. You have porosity in the welds, and all of this can be detected by a neural network. So that's basically the real world application side of things. What I really wanted to focus on is what is running through your mind in terms of how does this all help me convert the skill, AI skill, should ultimately help you make money in the job marketplace or in the startup market. I'll start off with the jobs and share with you what are some of the demand signals we are seeing currently in the market. So we call it the 15 career pathways. And it's essentially disrupting all industries. So if you look at CB Insights, right from cybersecurity to fintech, to marketing, to news and media, even there have been cases where an AI algorithm passed a better judgment on a case than a judge, because judges were found to be very biased when it gets close to lunchtime. Okay. So, but an algorithm never gets biased. So it was able to give a neutral judgment. So, I mean, multiple industries, even in the music industry, people thought art is something which you can't automate. You cannot create good music. But you're seeing a lot of algorithms learn from the patterns in music and generate music also. And art is also getting disrupted. It can paint also, So how do you cross this from a classroom AI perspective, where a lot of strengthening of foundation happened, which is extremely, extremely important, because without the foundations of AI, you'll not be able to apply it into real world outcomes. How do you make that jump? So one of the first pathways which exist isn't so you'll need to specialize at some point, because at the end of the day, if you start saying I'm an AI, because it becomes a commodity, everybody's saying I'm an AI specialist, you'll need to subspecialize. It's like everybody's saying I'm a doctor. Are you a dental doctor? Are you a heart specialist? Are you a kidney specialist? Specialization is going to be key, and specialization will help you differentiate yourself in the marketplace also. So one of the areas where we are seeing a huge supply demand gap is in the vision AI space. So if you look at India itself, Niramai as a company, Niramai is a Google ventures funded company out of Bangalore. Very interesting company. They help detect cancer in rural women. So if you go to the villages in India, they don't get access to very specialized oncologist. So what they are doing, that instead of the lady coming to the city, a digital assistant, kind of a anomaly detector of X-rays goes to the small towns, and Nirama essentially does that. Uncanny Vision does a lot of work in the surveillance camera space out of here. The second area is in what I would call time series specialists. So if you look at ABB, Siemens, all of them are making equipments, boilers, chillers, big metallic piece of equipments, and increasingly all these equipments are having a fabric of sensors around them: pressure sensors, shock sensors, temperature sensors. And all of these sensors are emitting high frequency time series data. And it's very important to, at the basic level, many of these companies are starting this journey by doing basic anomaly detection. So they have a lot of demand for people who can help them increase the anomalies they detect, and also predict remaining useful life of some of these equipments. So industrial space is one place where careers can be made. And this is an area you'll all know. So conversational AI specialists, a lot of chatbots are coming. Chatbot, I think many of you know about chatbots, and many of you would have even done projects in chatbot. But I think the most interesting opportunity out here lies in creating local language chatbots which can converse with you, let's say in Hindi, Punjabi, Malayalam, Telugu, because a big part of India thinks in thinks in regional languages. It doesn't think in English. And for you to engage with a bot, it would be good to engage in the same language their brain thinks in. So conversational AI is going to explode hugely, and especially the local language conversational AI. And Ask Sid is a company out of Bangalore which does that. There is Gyani, which is closely working with Accenture, which is building a lot of chatbots for various. Fourth is something which many of you would already known, modeling customer behavior and predicting outcomes. So for example, in the telecom industry, they want to predict churn. So Cloud Analytics is one company which focuses on predicting subscriber behavior based on call detail records and tower records. Month-End is a company focused on retail analytics out of Bangalore. Big multinationals like McDonald's and Burger King are their customers. And they focus a lot on predicting consumers' behavior, eating habits, store habits, pricing habits, stuff like that. So customer behavior prediction is a huge area where value can be added. And that's a nice career path. The fifth area is cybersecurity. I think this is one area where you're definitely guaranteed to get a job, I think, in the future, because the number of instances of, corporates getting hacked into, or, defense establishment getting hacked is huge. And there are not, and you cannot fight these kind of adverse events without having the necessary AI tools. So people will be creating a lot of products around cybersecurity AI data products, and that's definitely a huge opportunity for many of you to build your careers there. Marketing AI. Marketing is, again, it's not unusual area, because if you look at a Procter and Gamble, or if you look at a Unilever, they spend 18 to 20% of the revenue they get on marketing. Hundreds and hundreds of crores are spent on buying TV slots, doing digital spends, putting ads in Spotify and stuff like that. And when you spend hundreds of crores of rupees, so I, as the marketing head, let's say I'm given 100 crores. Now, how much do I put for Spotify? How much do I put for radio ads? How much do I put for TV ads? How do I allocate that amount? There's so many combinations and permutations which are possible. And market mix modeling is a construct which will help a brand manager categorize the spends and recommend the spends based on past performance. So it's an algorithm which analyzes the effectiveness of past advertisement on sales uplift and associates weights with all the levers. So you'll say, hey, TV was not that effective, whereas Google ad spend was more effective. So it'll attach weights to all these levers, marketing levers, and tell you which of these would have a greatest impact on sales outcomes. So market mix modeling is a huge area. Meritus, a part of Ogilvy Group out of India, based in Bangalore and Bombay, does a lot of work out there. The other exciting thing, and I think this is something which many people in India also would not know, is many startups and even corporates are emerging where they want to create autonomous driverless vehicles. So I'm just giving you an example. There's this company called Flux Auto, which is based out of Bangalore. Flux Auto, essentially what they do is they'll take an Eicher truck, traditional Eicher truck, they'll fit this device which they have created into that, and the truck, their vision is to make the truck driverless. Now, you'll still have a driver sit on the side just to monitor it, but the algorithm will be completely driving the truck. The beauty of this is, I was wondering, can you actually do this for Indian conditions? Can an algorithm learn the high amount of uncertainty which exists on Indian roads and control its behavior in real time? Actually, they did some field tests. So at least with 60% chaotic conditions, it's able to learn and reflect, and they're working on it to improve it. But it's a huge space, huge space. The other area, other company is a company called ATI Motors, ATI Motors. They focus on making electrical vehicles which are driverless. And this is meant, so for example, they're doing a pilot with TVS, where within the factory premises, they are moving goods from point A to point B. And today there is a person sitting on the vehicle and transporting it. So it's not on the highways or public thing, but within a controlled environment, can you make the transportation of material completely driverless? And these are places ATI Motors is working on that. And interestingly, one of the co-founders of ATI Motors is a 17-year-old kid. He's not even graduated. He dropped out of college because he knew algorithms, he knew autonomous systems. He learned it from YouTube and stuff like that. And he started his own company, and they funded very well, I would say. So, yeah, autonomous area. If any of you are interested, that's also an area. The hottest area, many of you would be knowing, is digital engagement itself. Many of these, whether it's Infosys, Cognizant, Wipro, the large companies are aggressively pushing digital engagement measurement and understanding the drivers of digital engagement to their customers. And they're actively looking for people with AI skills and a little bit of domain skills whom they can help use to deliver the projects they have. This is also a very, very, very massive area. This again is an underground movement. So if you look at India as a country, we are spending massively in AI-ifying everything, whether it's ships, whether it's submarines, whether it is satellite, tanks, every asset Army, Navy, or Air Force has will become autonomous in the next 5 to 10 years. Drones are already autonomous. They're also having prototypes. In Bangalore, they have a prototype of Soldier of the Future, where the soldier essentially wears a fabric which has a lot of sensors on it. So you can monitor the heartbeat and pulse of a soldier who's facing firing in the Kashmir Valley. Let's say, you can understand what kind of things is undergoing. Even his mental activity can be recorded, and all this data can be transmitted in real time in a compressed format and anomalies detected. So, but defense is massive area. So for example, there's this company called Tombow Imaging. They're based out of Bangalore. All of you would have heard of Wipro, Infosys, CTS. Many of you would not have heard of Tombow Imaging. In my mind, what Tombow Imaging is doing is more game-changing than what Wipro, TCS, and Infosys have done collectively. Tombow Imaging has made night vision glasses and a lot of those object and event detection. So when you are looking at objects and events in nighttime, there is a neural network which is operating. So high precision object event detection algorithms they developed. So they actually went to the Indian Defense Forces and said, no, we have a great product using which you can really identify the enemy in pitch darkness. But given the times they sold it, they were attempting to do a sell about 6-7 years back. They never thought an Indian product could do that. So they refused to buy from them. We bought it from the Israelis and the Americans, the night vision glasses. So what he did, Arvind is the co-founder of the company. He went and sold this product, his night vision glasses and algorithms which get embedded in that, to the Israeli Special Forces and to the US Special Forces. It was so good that it was better than what they had currently. And they started using it. And when the Indian Forces and the Israeli Special Forces came together for a joint exercise, the Indian Special Forces borrowed their counterparts, and they said they were able to see it very clearly. And they asked them, where did you get this? Who makes these? And they said, we procured it from a company in Bangalore. But the algorithms which these guys are writing is on the nose tip of missiles manufactured by Lockheed Martin and sold to multiple countries. It's embedded within that. So you all should feel proud that an algorithm written out of India is powering some very mission critical defense applications globally. And for example, right now, Bharat Electronics Limited and DRDO, all of them are recruiting massively in the defense AI space. And because we have competition from China, and China is outspending us in AI. And then that's a huge area where a lot of money will go into. The other area I wanted to talk to you is about risk analytics. So those of you who love money and who love risk, so you have credit risk, your market risk, there is a Basel III framework to model risk. So banking is an application area. All banks have a dedicated risk analytics group where they're continuously trying to model the risk. What is the exposure at default? What are the risk-weighted assets he has, just in case he defaults and stuff like that. So modeling every customer who has taken a loan and overall risk to the bank itself using analytics is a huge thing. This is another area which I personally am very bullish about the possibilities. And I'm sure Sarabjit will teach you some of these things, which is on emotion detection. Actually, I found it difficult that an algorithm can detect, roughly 9 different emotional states. Today, it can detect anger, it can detect contempt, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, surprise. All of these elements can be detected by an algorithm. So I never believed in it. But then what I did was, there was an application from Affectiva. They were essentially allowing you to download free. And what you had to do was show your face to the camera, and it'll tell you what is the predominant emotion you're experiencing. I actually downloaded it, and it was fairly accurate. I would say more than 80% of the time it was accurate. 80% was good enough for emotion detection for me, at least. I always thought that only my mother and my wife could detect what is going inside my head. But now algorithms can really process various parts of your face and understand what emotional states you're undergoing. Now, there are a lot of applications of this. What are the practical applications of this? Definitely from a security point of view. So if you're in an airport and the security officer thinks and he can look at nervous behavior and flag people for secondary checks and stuff like that. That's from a security point of view. But the other most important thing is actually, especially after pandemic, a lot of people are experiencing what I would call mental unhealthiness, or mental well-being is affected. There's a lot of pressure. Jobs are lost, salaries have come down, fear of a disease, death of loved ones. So the cases of mental unwell-being, at least in Bangalore, I know a lot of people have been affected by mental unwell-being than the coronavirus itself. So what you do normally, you go to a therapist. So when you go to a therapist or a counselor, no, 80-90% of his or her time is spent in asking you questions to go deeper into the root cause of it, and also along the way detect your emotional states. No, are you no having experiencing sadness because of something? Do you have fear telling something else? Are you experiencing contempt for a person when you're telling the story of something which has affected you badly, trauma, for example? So they want to detect these emotional states associated with the stories they are telling them. And this is one place where I think emotion detection can make a huge difference, because if the counselor detects the emotion wrongly, then they're also going to prescribe a wrong treatment pathway. So it's very, very important to get emotion detection right. And I think tools like this, companies like Affectiva, Element Human, Feel, will do a huge service to the mental health well-being space. The other area is sound. So today it's not critical mass. I think increasingly sound will become an important data point for analytics. So there's a company called A Squared IoT out of Bangalore. Very innovative company. They have been, awarded got a lot of awards from Intel and many of these companies. So what does A Squared IoT do? So A Squared IoT essentially takes sound signals. So in a factory environment, if you look at an experienced technician, he'll be able to listen to the sound of a motor and say if this motor is going to get sick and go down, or the motor is healthy. Based on past years of experience, just by listening to the sound, an experienced technician is able to assess the health of the motor. So what this does is essentially replicated. So they have one of the largest repositories of sound data in the world from industrial applications, from motors, pumps, and all of that. And they've got tag data, and they're learning all the failure modes of these equipments from sound data. And today, I would say the demand for sound specialists is not so great, but I think in the next 3 to 5 years, it'll explode. The other area which is of huge importance is edge artificial intelligence. So for example, this is an LNG carrier transporting liquid nitrogen gas at minus 200 degrees from point A to point B. Traditionally, every AI requires a cloud. You need to access internet and cloud to get access to those APIs. But what do you do when there is no internet coverage? So essentially, you need to have local edge inference engines, as we call it. You should learn from the signals on the edge, and you should also infer the signatures at the edge. So there are specialized companies. So SwitchOn is a company out of Bangalore funded by in the Infosys founders. Fogon is a company out of Silicon Valley. Intel and NVIDIA, all of them are pouring a lot of money into building edge intelligence capabilities. And that's also an interesting career pathway for many people. The other career pathway is in the HR space. So those of you who love to work with humans as well as algorithms, this is a huge space. There is a company called belong.com, which essentially collects a lot of what they call social signals, your LinkedIn activity, a lot of public activity, and internal behavior to predict. So a company like, let's say, Infosys or Wipro, they want to predict if any of the employees are going to churn. Today, they do not have a process. So companies like Belong will collect all this behavioral data from employees and predict the probability of churn for an employee. And again, the other interesting use case is within an organization, right? There is a lot of email exchanges. At the end of the day, an email exchange has from, to, and using just the from, to, and the date on which you communicated, the algorithms need not look at the content, just from, to, metadata and the dates. They can build up what is the kind of community building which is happening. Are these people very close to each other? Are they shrinking? So you can do basic community detection using graph analysis and find out what is the health of the company itself based. Healthcare is an important area. It's a massive area. It's a topic of its own. So if some of you like well-being, I mean, a lot of companies, so on the right-hand side, CB Insight, there's so many companies which are completely disrupting the healthcare space in the US. And I think India will also see a wave of startups. So every disease is a company. Cancer detection, so many companies. Heart beat anomaly detection. There's a very interesting company out of Hyderabad, which aims to collect the largest repository of fetal heartbeats. So when the mother is carrying a child for 9 months, they have a sensor which is strapped onto the mother's stomach, which continuously records the heartbeat of the fetus. Because sometimes when the fetus is having an abnormal heartbeat, it doesn't get detected, and results in a lot of adverse events. So what they're trying to do is collect data regarding the heart condition of a kid as it is in its stomach, and detect anomalies and send an SMS to a doctor or a gynecologist, etc. Interesting companies. So in this whole space, so many opportunities are there. The point I want to try to make is there are at least 15 I've put out here. But there'll be much more. And I'm sure with Dr. Sarabjit's guidance, all of you will be able to find out where your heart lies or where your calling lies, and work with him to create very customized pathways so that your projects can be tuned, your resume projects and everything can be tuned towards the career paths where your heart lies. Because very important for you to follow your inner calling. You should not be doing something because it gets you money. And this is a good framework which will help you identify. And with a lot of experts like Dr. Sarabjit, you can find your own path. But from a skill perspective, and this is an area where Dr. Sarabjit and I had a lot of conversations, it's very important to be what I call a T-shaped person. So you can be I-shaped, you're an expert at one thing, or you can be a generalist in a lot of algorithms. But both of the earlier vertical guy or a horizontal guy is very suboptimal. You need to have a mix of both, and what does it really mean? What is a T-scape? So you need to have, you need to know algorithms. So today you will be learning convolution neural networks, LSTM for sequence analysis, collaborative filtering, transfer learning, ensemble. So a lot of bunch of stuff you learn, and it's very, very important to get these foundations and math foundations right, because without getting the foundation, the building will fall. So it's very important to get this right. However, you need to complement this with domain skills. You need to understand product cannibalization. You need to know multi-channel behavior. You need to know market mix modeling. It's very important to understand the domain and the problem spaces. AI is in the solution space, but this is in the problem space. It's very important to understand the problem space very, very intimately. Again, if you go for a job interview, if you have somebody from Unilever interviewing you, and if you say, one person says, I knew, I can do LSTM very well, I can do convolution neural networks very well, or whatever the techniques you go. Whereas another person says, hey, I know multi-channel problems you're facing. I know brand cannibalization is an important problem, and here is how I would solve it. The guy who can combine domain and AI will have a greater chance. And the third aspect, which I think is very, very important, for example, at Stanford and Berkeley, I've been interacting with a lot of people. The intersection of human-centric AI is very important. You have to make AI very, very human-centric. Storytelling, new business models, empathy, and a lot of these design thinking principles also come in. So if you can combine domain, human-centric thing, and AI, you'll be really a complete human being from an AI perspective. So it's like eating a burger. You need the bun, you need the cheese, you need the meat also. And unless until all of these things come together, it doesn't deliver a holistic experience. Now, having said that, I will probably shift gears a little bit. And since many of you from Punjab and very entrepreneurial state, I found a lot of entrepreneurs. When I was living in the US, I was very struck by how Gujaratis and Punjabis chart their own path. Unlike many from the southern states, the southern states, I would say, are relatively risk averse. But the northern states really take a lot of huge risk, and because of that, a lot of economic value has been unlocked. So this is a topic which I am very passionate about, and many of you who want to become entrepreneurs, you want to answer two very simple questions: where should I play, and how should I play? So where do you know? So you're a lot of areas: retail, banking, telecom. So many ideas will come to you, but which is the one blockbuster app which will deliver the maximum economic value for your customer and for yourself? Is there a method to spotting that? So I'll not go into the details of this. There is something called Market Opportunity Navigator. It's a very step-by-step process where the first step, you map all the opportunities which are available in the market. In the second step, it's called attractiveness mapping. Which opportunity is most attractive? So on the x-axis, you have the effort, low effort and high effort. On the y-axis, you have low dollar unlock and high dollar unlock. What gets you more money? Your preference is to focus on the top left quadrant, gold mines as we call it, which is less effort, more money. Okay, start with that. And once you are able to do that, go to the bottom left, which is small money but low effort, which means you're starting to collect a lot of logos, referenceable logos for your company, but you'll not get that much money, but you collect logos which build your credibility in the marketplace. And then you aim for the moonshots. Moonshots are really applications. A lot of effort has to be spent in. For example, you want to completely disrupt the way counseling is done using video apps and emotion detection. I mean, a lot of effort has to be spent, but at the same time, it unlocks a lot of value for both the customer and for the marketplace. And then you will decide what to pursue. It's called the private market opportunity mapping. So I'll be happy to talk about this in detail, but any of you want to take the first step towards entrepreneurship, creating a market opportunity navigator is a very, very important thing. So if you don't create this, you will end up solving the wrong problem. The other thing is trying to find out what is called as a product market fit. You have a product on one hand and you have a customer need on the other hand. So one point I wanted to make is that all problems need not be solved. So for example, you have to ask yourself, is the problem you're solving a vitamin or a painkiller? What's the difference between a vitamin problem and a painkiller problem? When you get a headache, severe headache, you don't think. Anybody gives you Saridon, you pay that money, you're not even price sensitive, you just take it. Let's say any of your elderly relatives gets a heart attack. You have to solve it. It's again a killer, right? You want to resolve that part. You're not looking at how much to spend. You immediately buy it, right? So you need to really go for a painkiller problem where instant gratification is done and a minimum guaranteed outcome is given. Whereas a vitamin, you're healthy, and you do have problems, but you have to educate the customer. You have to tell them that you have a problem. And once he acknowledges this, then only you take the vitamin. So as an entrepreneur, it would be good to aim for painkillers, because vitamins means the sales cycle is long, and you'll burn up a lot of money before you start making. And in order to find out whether you have product market fit, you have to decompose it into two. Is there a problem market fit? For example, the question is, has the customer budgeted to solve that problem? So if you go to a customer, he may say, hey, that's an important problem to solve. I really want to solve that problem. And you as a startup will think, hey, let me build a product for this. I'll get a lot of data. I'll predict an outcome. You go to him and say, hey, I solved your problem. Why don't you buy it from me? He will not buy it from you. And you are wondering what happened. So it's very important to find out, are you solving a problem which is budgeted for? Okay. So don't just look for problems to solve, look for budgeted problems to solve for. And that's a very important distinction, which many startups, almost I would say 70-80% of founders miss, because they're very excited by the solution, that they miss asking the question, am I solving a budgeted problem? Then they find, and the other thing is message market fit. You have got a great product, but if you cannot communicate its value in the first 30 seconds, you lose out interest from the buyer, because attention spans are coming down increasingly day by day. Everybody's hit with thousands of messages. And you need to, as a founder, distill your messages and communicate impact in 30 seconds. Just to give you an example, today, if you look at it, there are a lot of songs which are there in the marketplace, right? So whenever a new song comes, let's say a nice new Punjabi rap song, for example, no, in the first 10-15 seconds, you'll decide whether this is the song which I want to listen to or not. And it's the same of startup messages. It's like listening to a song. If you don't deliver something interesting the first for 10-15 seconds, you lost the plot. So all of these things are very important. The second thing I would emphasize as a founder, if you're going to start a journey, is don't sit inside a room thinking about the problem. No, you really have to get out into the field and create what is called the user journey map. So the question to have you walked a mile in the user's shoes and experiencing the world through his eyes? Unless until you have walked a mile in the user's shoes, you should not create a company, I would say. It's very, very important to feel the customer's pain before you touch technology or solutions. Just to give you an example, this is an exercise which some of the Stanford students are doing. They want to create an AI product for emergency rooms. So what they did was, before they started coding or doing anything, they spent months in the emergency room recording the emergency room experiencing. And literally, you can see the guy with the camera recording it completely. Then there are these guys who are trying to build products, AI-powered products, for the rural villages where, what they call banking for the unbanked. They don't get loans so easily. So can I create an AI product which would help identify and give loans to rural people? You have to spend a lot of time soaking into the context and understanding how a villager sees the banking experience. And if you're trying to improve placement outcomes, build an AI app. Placement is a huge area. I don't know which company to apply for, which career pathway is good for me. You'd normally go to counselors, placement counselors, but it can also be automated. And you really have to talk to a lot of students before you build it. So in the first phase of your journey as an entrepreneur, and this is a mistake we as a company made in Flutura, is we were very passionate about AI and products, but we were never curious. Okay. And it cost us a lot. So it's very important to be more curious and understand how the customer is seeing the world. How do you climb into the customer's head and see the world through his eyes before you start bolting technology onto it? And I like this quote from Sadhguru. It says, you have to look at the problem as if you look at how an infant does. An infant, what it does is it has got what is called as a beginner's mind. It just absorbs everything. It doesn't label, it doesn't judge anything, right? It just absorbs. So when we as adults are looking at the world, our instinct is to judge and label. I would say suspend your judgmental brain and just absorb information. And you'll get a lot of insight by just looking at the world without judgmental eyes. And at the end of the day, this is exactly what we create. This is the user journey map. This is something which we created at Flutura. I'll not go into the details of it. So what happens when an alarm goes off, the step-by-step process is documented. And customer will say, this is the current user journey for a maintenance guy who's trying to troubleshoot an equipment. How does my world change? So this is how we showed them. This is how your to-be journal would look like. I will auto-generate a ticket. I will do my auto diagnostics. So he's able to clearly visualize what his before journey and his after journey would look like. So that's all I had to say, and I know covered a lot of things. So just to step back, just remember three things. I would say the first important thing is India is going to be a global hub for consumer and industrial AI. I know many of you would be looking at going abroad. I mean, nothing wrong with that. But also, I think there's going to be an explosive opportunity in AI space in India itself. And you'll find fantastic salaries in India also for AI specialists today. So do consider India as a playing ground to chart your career pathways. Second is focus on job-ready AI skills. Really understand how do you become a T-shaped individual. You need to mix a little bit of domain, little bit of user journey mapping and stuff like that. And the third part is look at startups. Either create your own startups or work with startups because your learning curve with startups will be dramatic as opposed to large corporates. You will learn in 6 months to 1 year what you would learn in a corporate in 5 to 8 years, I would say, because it's very intense. It's very stressful, but it's very intense and you learn a lot. And honestly, in the next 3 to 5 years, startups out of India will herald a new renaissance where we'll actually be and I really think will give Israel and Silicon Valley a competition for their money. And we get seeing a lot of that happening in Gurgaon, in pockets. And I think the next wave of that will come from small towns, Jaipur, Mysore, Trivandrum, all of them will start becoming startup hubs, and a lot of opportunity in AI that way. That's all I had. As you find your own path, happy to share any questions.
Thank you, the wonderful Mr. Derick Jones, for your speech here, your talk. I think a lot of the folks listening to you also seem to have appreciated your point about curiosity coming before passion. And I do agree with you. I believe that, in the old-fashioned world, the US was the land of opportunity. I think the real land of opportunity today is India. If for nothing else, we have so many more problems to solve that I think there's a huge opportunity. I know there have been a number of questions along the way. Ravinder, would you want to unmute and ask numerous points and questions that you've been making here?
Sure. So this is great, Mr. Derick. Very, very insightful. I think you captured a lot of stuff. I mean, more than questions, it's more like resonating and trying to really learn from this spread. Just from just representing a little bit of some of the budding students in the cybersecurity and on the IoT areas. We're just curious to understand. Like in cybersecurity, there are many big players and very established players. So there's a big entry barrier for some of the entry-level engineers to kind of make through there. So can you suggest some startups, organizations in your experience who are very open and where opportunities lie for these entry-level engineers on the IoT and cybersecurity area? That will really help the folks. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I think cybersecurity, I think a lot of private players are there. I think the Indian cybersecurity startup space is just getting started. No, there's not much critical mass, I would say. But the products are just getting started. But I think the services place already picked up. I think you will find Bharat Electronics Limited, BEL, has got a cybersecurity division for both consumer grid as well as the industrial grid. So they want to protect the consumer network as well as the industrial networks. A lot of nuclear stations. So you find Neyveli Lignite Corporation, but because industrial networks are getting targeted. So you will find all of these industrial companies will have an industrial grid security group. ABB has an industrial grid security group. Siemens has it. So one is the multinationals who have an Indian arm, who are actively looking at their captives having grid security specialists. That would be one area. The other is the Indian public sector itself. And the salaries have changed. It is not like earlier days. Now they started paying, I would say, more reasonable salaries. So that's one space. And the third sector would be startup. Startup is still fledgling, I would say. There's no critical mass. But I think the next 2 to 3 years, you will find a lot of VC funding going into cybersecurity, both in the consumer cybersecurity space as well as the industrial grid security space. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Derick. Rahul, you have a question around the emotional AI piece. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sir, I want to ask that what are the chances or the rate of success of knowing that whether an employee will churn early and or she is telling a lie while interviewing them using that emotional AI and HR specialist AI?
Okay. No, I mean, it's like this. So the algorithm will learn from the data. So as long as the algorithm neural net can see a critical mass of data, so you should have breadth and depth of data. So you should be able to see, just to take an example. So let's say how culturally you exhibit emotion, let's say happiness, an Indian exhibits happiness would be completely different from how a Chinese exhibits happiness, or let's say an American exhibits happiness. So you will need to have representative data set. At the end of the day, it boils down to the breadth and depth of data. You have a lot of data regarding how an American expresses happiness or the Chinese expresses, and the depth of data itself. So if you have that, I mean, initially, as with everything, the accuracy levels will be very low, when you embark upon this. So companies like the ones which I showed, what they're doing is they're trying to build the largest repository of human face emotions in the world. So they're giving a lot of apps away. You'll use that app. As a part of that app, they'll collect your human face data and keep it, So the first part of the job is collecting the largest repository of emotion database in the world from facial expressions by country or by culture, and whoever has access to that critical masses, it's a access to high value data set, I would say, has access to that high value data set, will be able to quickly tune in the hyperparameters of your neural net and learn from it faster than person who does not have access to the breadth and depth of data. So the name of the game is being the first to have critical access to emotion database in the world.
Derick, I have a question, or actually, I'd love your comment on this. So a couple of weeks ago, I was interacting with some researchers at CSIRO Australia, and they were HCI experts. And one of the ideas that has started getting very popular in HCI is the fact that a lot of the systems that have been developed today have been developed with considering what they call the weird user. So weird stands for, I believe, Western, industrialized, rich, democratic, and educated, right? Not in the right
like
order,
that.
but right.
Love that.
Yeah, I loved it too. And I've been using this every opportunity I get. So I'm just trying to show my vocabulary here by mentioning it. In AI also, and in fact, with a lot of offline research that used to take place in medicine, for example, I remember my child always, we were looked upon suspiciously when I had my first child because we were living in England, and they had these growth charts, right, that were printed and given to us that your child must grow at this pace. Mm-hmm. And of course, Indian children are smaller than Caucasian babies, right? So we were looked at with suspicion as to why we were trying to kill our child, whereas we just, the data that was used was just inaccurate, right? The model was biased. The same is true for a lot of AI as well, right? And you just mentioned about emotions as well, the fact that you have Chinese data sets and you have American data sets. But when we look at India, there is a lack of real data that's been collected, right, for this purpose. And we know a lot of these deep learning models end up making predictions based on features that are irrelevant, right? Have you experienced that in your applications where you felt that, hey, we really have to go and collect new unbiased data in some way or take that into account?
Yeah. In many of these cases, so if you look at the industrial space, they lag behind the consumer space by almost 10 years. They're very old-fashioned people, very slow to change, unlike retail, telecom, and all that. So first was a mental model challenge. They refused to believe that an algorithm can learn from data what Joe does not know from 30 years. Okay, right? So they did not have the discipline of collecting and storing all the operational memory of that equipment. Okay, so we had to essentially go ahead and say, you cannot flush this data, it's gold. So you need to store that organizational memory or that operational memory into a data lake and make sure and for future deployments. So that is definitely the first step in this space. In many of these cases, that's the case. And I think from a business point of view, there's a massive opportunity there because whoever can syndicate access to high value data sets wins in the marketplace. Yeah. So and we have definitely, to answer your question, yes, we faced that. And a big part of our effort was in building massive sensor data lakes to learn what was the equipment experiencing for the last 7 years.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Chidi. Chidi, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sir, I want to know if this application is applied to offshore well, and in the oil and gas, I clearly understand that some of these offshore platforms are totally unmanned. So, and how is your solution going to help by monitoring all those processes once the oil leave the wellhead, gets to the choke, and takes place in the compressor? How can someone who is in his office and is not offshore try to monitor all those processes?
Sure. So we did I'll just share a concrete example. So we did a project for a company called Patterson Drilling in Houston. Patterson Drilling is the second largest drilling services company in the world. So if you look at it, at the end of the day, they have a drill bit. It's like drilling for water. So there's a metallic piece rotating at high speed. Every drill bit has a lot of information which it captures and transmits to the ground level data logger. It says what is the rate at which, what is the RPM, rate of, RPM of this thing, what is the torque it's experiencing, what is the shock, what is the vibration, what is the temperature on that bit. All these health parameters of the drill bit, as it grinds to the earth, is transmitted in real time to the surface. And an operator is sitting on the surface. What he does is, based on these signals, he manually twists and turns so that the drill bit goes on time to the depth it requires. So what we essentially did was, based on the real-time drilling signals, we built what is called as a RPM calibration recommendation. We will tell what is the right RPM for the right depth, because if you don't get it right, a lot of dangerous things can happen. So one of the applications of using AI for upstream drilling is to build recommender engines, operational recommender engines. It could be an RPM recommender. It could be the calibration recommender. So a lot of parameters need to be calibrated. What is the operating envelope of that? So recommendation engines is a very good application for upstream drilling operations. And sensor data is available today. Sensor data is available from data loggers upstream. Yeah.
Okay. Can we also have something that can monitor the flow rate and sometimes try to manage your facility offshore? Yeah. Because sometimes some of those platforms are totally unmanned. So they go there maybe, let me say, twice a week or sometimes once a week. Yeah. And before you know, things can go haywire if you're not regular. So how can that process be managed?
So the other thing is edge. For example, if it's an offshore oil rig, you cannot transport the data, all this data to the central command center. So you'll have edge intelligence on the rig platform itself. Using optical fiber OFCs, they transmit the data locally and they get the job done. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Derick. Chidi is one of our students from Nigeria and actually works in an oil and gas company,
wonderful.
So hence the interest. Santosh, we are over time, but if you'll just give us a couple of minutes, I'll take a couple of questions here. Is that okay, Derick?
Sure.
Just two more questions that are here. One is from Santosh, who's actually from the banking industry and is asking about AI fintech. So Santosh, if you can just ask your question, and you can ask your question.
Sir, yeah, thanks, Derick. It was definitely a great presentation, and we got a lot of insights around it. So if you can shed some light on the banking startups. Basically, there are a couple of fintechs such as the Paytm and Google Pay and a lot of things coming up. So that poses a big challenge to the legacy banks. So what could be some of the opportunities for the fintechs as such, or what could be some of the areas to focus on from an entrepreneur standpoint? So just thinking through that.
So I'm not a fintech expert, but I'll share with you what are the themes I'm hearing there. But one major theme I'm hearing is banking for the unbanked. You have a lot of people in small towns who are unable to show collateral or show anything, because of which the bank refuses to give them loans, and because of which economic activity does not happen. So there are a lot of startups trying to disrupt that space by building some innovative. So they have a different angle to it, how they would provide loans to the unbanked. And I think that's a huge area of interest from the venture capitalists itself, because if a lot of countries have to grow, the rural segment has to grow. If they don't grow, just the cities grow, the country is not going to grow. So, and providing access to risk capital is a very important dimension to that. So banking for the unbanked is one huge area. The other thing I've seen within the established bank is essentially build a lot of cross-sell models. no, so if you bought this product, which are the product, and that is classic telecom also, right? Telecom is extremely mature, but banking, I think, is slowly trying to embrace a lot of cross-sell models for that. And I heard a couple of startups in the US talk about something on, I never understood Bitcoin very well, but there is a lot of interest there. My son invests in that. He tells me he can make money, but I really don't understand that space. But I heard that keyword come up often and looks like an interesting space, but I don't know the details, to be honest.
We'll just take one last question. And in fact, I'll ask you that to save time. So will healthcare AI ever surpass human judgment in your view?
It has already started. So if you look at radiologists who are and a lot of tests are approved in the Bay Area. There are a lot of tests where cancer detection algorithm can do better than a trained radiologist. Okay, so that's one specific area, and because there's critical mass of data available, a lot of experimentation and tuning got done, and over a period of time, it has eclipsed. So I think anything so if you look at a doctor, what is he doing? A doctor, bulk of his time is spending understanding signals and understanding anomalies, whether it could be from blood, whether it is this thing. And human eyes can only process 6 or 7 data sets at a point in time. Beyond, too much information, you tend to miss things. So, no, and if your body is so complex that it has hundreds of signals, it's very difficult for a doctor to triangulate. So I think one of the things you could see is actually Vinod Khosla, one of the most important VCs in the Bay Area. He was invited to a medical convention center. Very controversial guy. He went and opened a statement saying, in the next 5 years, 80% of you will not have a job. And he had a basis to say it. He didn't mean to insult them, but it was grounded in a very scientific fact, because the rate at which data was getting generated and algorithms were learning, the velocity of that was far exceeding human capability. So I think in pockets, you'll start seeing disease detection being done better by, so for example, diabetic retinopathy, some of Google's algorithms, they got data from Madurai Eye Hospital, Arvind Eye Hospital. Okay, they didn't get it from US hospital. Their Googlers came to Madurai, got all that access to diabetic retinopathy data, and today they can really do some life-saving things with that. So diabetic retinopathy, radiological anomalies, already things have started. And it all boils down to how much breadth and depth of data can the algorithm see. That's all. Right.
Wonderful. Derick, thank you so much. We could continue to talk forever, I think, but to respect your time, thank you for coming and spending this time with us. And I hope that we will attract you back sometime. You've obviously had a very positive impact on the students from the questions they've been asking. So thank you so much for it.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Sabudh. Thank you all for having me. Bye-bye. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too.